When I opened my eyes, the world didn't look real. The ceiling above me was white, too white, like someone had scrubbed away all the color of life. A slow hum came from somewhere near my ear, machines, wires, tubes, and then pain. It hit me like memory coming back too fast. My throat was dry, my chest felt like it had been borrowed from someone else, and when I tried to move, I couldn't. My fingers twitched, my legs didn't. A nurse appeared at my side, startled at the blinking of my eyes. "Mr. Dawson, you're awake." Her voice trembled. She pressed a button, calling someone. Doctors rushed in, voices overlapping. 3 months, he's stable, a miracle. 3 months. I blinked again, trying to understand. 3 months of nothing, no dreams, no sound, just the kind of silence that feels eternal. When they finally left, the nurse adjusted my pillow and whispered, "You've been through a lot. Your wife, she used to visit every day at first." At first. I wanted to ask, "Used to?" But my voice cracked like sandpaper. "Where is she?" I managed to whisper. The nurse hesitated, looked away. "She hasn't come in a while." Something inside me sank, but I told myself there was a reason. Maybe she couldn't handle seeing me like that. Maybe she was taking care of our son, Ethan. That night, the hospital felt endless. Every beep of the monitor echoed like a countdown to the truth I didn't yet know. Days passed. I learned how to move again, how to speak without pain, how to pretend that waking up from a coma meant everything would go back to normal. On the 6th day, the doctor said I was strong enough for visitors. I waited. I waited for her face, that familiar smile, to walk through the door. But she didn't. No flowers, no letters, no sign she even knew I was alive. When I asked the nurse to check my emergency contact number, she frowned. "Sir, this number is no longer active." That was the first crack in the world I thought I still belonged to. When I finally left the hospital 2 weeks later, the world looked foreign. My body was weaker, thinner, but my hope was stubborn. I called my best friend, Mark. He didn't answer. I called my parents, straight to voicemail. And then I called my wife's old number. It rang once. Then a robotic voice said, "This number is no longer in service." I remember standing there on the hospital steps, staring at the phone in my shaking hand, thinking, maybe this is just a bad dream within a dream, because nothing about it made any sense. When I reached home, the driveway was empty. The windows dark. Our house, the one I'd spent 3 years fixing, now looked abandoned. Inside, it smelled like dust and absence. There were no toys on the floor, no pictures on the wall, no laughter in the air, just silence. And then I saw it. On the kitchen table, a single brown envelope. Inside, there were papers, divorce papers, signed, dated, from 2 months ago. My wife, Anna, had signed them while I was lying unconscious in a hospital bed. At the bottom, in neat blue ink, her name curved confidently, like she'd never looked back. That night, I sat in the dark, reading those papers again and again, hoping I'd missed something, some note, some apology. But there was nothing, just my name and hers. An ending written without me. I stared at the date of her signature. 2 months ago. 2 months before I even opened my eyes. And then I noticed something else. A new address on the document. Not mine. Hers. The address of a townhouse on the other side of the city. The next morning, I drove there. Every turn of the wheel felt heavier. When I reached the street, I parked across from the townhouse. The curtains were drawn, but I could see shadows moving inside. A woman's silhouette, a child's laughter. My son! But before I could even take a step toward the door, someone opened it. Anna walked out, holding hands with a man I didn't recognize. Tall, clean-cut, expensive suit. He kissed her forehead as their son ran ahead of them to a shiny black car parked in the driveway. I froze. It wasn't just that she'd moved on. It was how easily she seemed to erase me. That night, I sat in my car outside their house until the lights went out. Every part of me wanted to bang on that door and demand an explanation. But I didn't. Because something in me knew whatever I'd wake up to tomorrow was no longer the life I'd left behind. People say waking up from a coma gives you a second chance at life. They never tell you what to do when that life has already moved on without you. And as I sat there, under the dim glow of a streetlight, I realized maybe I hadn't survived that accident after all. Maybe the man I used to be never really woke up. But the man sitting there that night, he was someone else entirely. Someone who'd learned that the line between love and revenge is thinner than anyone wants to admit. When I opened the door to Ethan's room, it was like walking into a ghost story. Not one haunted by spirits, but by absence. The walls were still painted sky blue, with those little glow-in-the-dark stars we'd stuck up together 2 summers ago. But the bed was stripped bare. No toys, no posters. Even the framed photo of us, father and son at the zoo, was gone. I don't remember how long I stood there, staring at the outline of where his bed used to be. Just this empty rectangle on the carpet, like life had been cut out of the picture and no one told me. The air smelled like dust and faint lavender, the kind Anna used to spray on Ethan's pillow so he'd fall asleep faster. Now it smelled like the past, stale, unreachable, gone. I sat down on the floor. Not because I wanted to, but because my legs couldn't hold me anymore. 3 months in a coma. That's all it took for my entire world to evaporate. I remember Ethan's voice. He was 7, always asking questions, always building something with his hands. He used to say, "Dad, when I grow up, I'll fix everything you break." And I'd laugh and say, "Then you'll be a busy man." Now, there was nothing left to fix. I found an old crayon on the floor, red, half melted, broken at the middle. I picked it up and held it like it was gold. That was the moment it hit me. Not just that my wife had left me, but that she had taken my son. My reason to fight, my reason to wake up. When I walked through the rest of the house, I noticed the small things she'd taken. Her favorite mug, the family photos, the clock from our living room wall, the one I'd fixed 5 times because she said it ticked too loudly. She'd even taken the little cactus from the windowsill, the one Ethan had named Spike. It wasn't just abandonment, it was erasure. She hadn't left me, she'd deleted me. And that hurt more than any physical wound. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's face. His smile, his messy hair, the way he'd crawl into my hospital bed after long shifts, whispering, "Don't be tired, Dad, I'll take care of you." I'd take that over 1,000 apologies. But instead, I had silence. And a question that refused to die in my head. How long had she been planning this? Because you don't disappear this cleanly overnight. You don't move into another man's life unless there's a blueprint. The next morning, I found an old laptop in the closet, my work computer.
When I turned it on, the wallpaper was still a photo of Ethan at the lake. Sunlight in his hair. Pure joy. But when I opened the browser, something strange caught my eye. Emails. Dozens of them. All marked unread. All sent from my wife's email to someone named Daniel. I clicked one. He's in the coma. The doctors say it's indefinite. I can't keep living like this. You said you'd take care of us. I'm trusting you. Dated a month after my accident. My hands trembled. As I scrolled further. Ethan's starting to call you Dad. I know it's too soon, but it just happened. I didn't correct him. 2 months later. I couldn't breathe. It was like the room got smaller with every word. Then came the last one. Sent only 3 weeks before I woke up. I filed the papers. It's done. I'll visit his hospital room tomorrow for closure, but after that, I'm finished with the past. She'd written closure like I was an unfinished chapter in her story. And the worst part? She was right. I was the coma she'd already moved on from. But one line in that final email stood out. Ethan doesn't need to know the details. You're his father now. That was the line that broke something inside me. Not my heart, but the part of me that still believed love could survive betrayal. For the next few days, I did what anyone would do after waking into a life that no longer belonged to them. I pretended to heal. The doctors thought I was recovering physically, but they didn't know I was planning emotionally. Because while Anna was out there building her new family, I was here rebuilding something stronger. Clarity. I wasn't going to beg for explanations. I wasn't going to chase her. I was going to make her see what she'd walked away from. Not with words, but with something far more powerful. Results. People talk about revenge like it's fire. They're wrong. Revenge is ice. It doesn't burn. It freezes. It waits. And when it strikes, it doesn't scream. It whispers. And as I stood there in that empty room holding a broken red crayon in my hand, I whispered the first promise I'd made in months.
I'm coming back for what's mine. Not with anger, not with violence, but with truth. Because truth has a way of knocking louder than guilt ever will. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The city was still asleep, quiet enough that I could hear my own thoughts echo. I sat in the kitchen, staring at my coffee, waiting for it to taste like comfort again. It didn't. I kept seeing her face, Anna, the woman who once promised to hold my hand through every storm. Now she was the storm. For hours, I debated what to do with the truth sitting in my inbox. Part of me wanted to delete it, pretend it wasn't real. But another part, the part that had already died once, needed to see how deep the wound went. So I did what I had to. I found Daniel. It didn't take long. One search of her new address led me to his name on the mailbox. Daniel Cross. A real estate consultant. Handsome. Polished. Everything I wasn't after months in a hospital bed. But that wasn't the worst part. What broke me was his profile. Public. Full of smiling pictures. Anna by his side. In one photo, they were cutting a cake. Her dress was white. His caption read, "Grateful to have found love again after loss. Here's to new beginnings." The date? 2 months before I woke up. She hadn't just left me. She'd married him while I was still in a coma. I remember laughing. Not the funny kind. The kind that hurts. The kind that sounds like someone cracking from the inside. Loss. That's what he wrote. After loss.
as if I was the tragedy they both overcame, as if I had died and they were the heroes who rebuilt from the ashes. But I wasn't dead. Not yet. And the thing about ghosts is they always come back for unfinished business. Later that week, I drove back to that townhouse. This time, I parked closer. Close enough to see through the thin curtains of their living room. Ethan sat on the couch, laughing. Daniel knelt beside him, helping him with a model airplane, the exact same one I'd bought Ethan for his birthday before the accident. I'd hidden it in the garage, planning to surprise him. I never got the chance. Now it sat on another man's table, under another man's hands. And then Anna walked in. Her hair shorter, lighter, her laugh freer. She looked happy, peaceful, even. Like the past 3 years of our life had been an inconvenience she'd finally recovered from. I watched through the glass as she kissed Daniel. Not shy, not hesitant, just certain. Ethan giggled, called out, "Mom, Dad, look!" And Daniel looked up, smiling. "Nice work, son." That word, son, hit harder than any accident could. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Every muscle in my jaw ached from holding back the sound I wanted to make, a sound that didn't belong to the calm, decent man I used to be. I wasn't decent anymore, and I wasn't calm. I was patient. And patience is the sharpest weapon there is. For the next 2 weeks, I observed. No calls, no confrontation, just watching. I learned their routine, when they left, when they came home, when Ethan went to school. I wasn't stalking. I was studying, because understanding your enemy is the first step to defeating them, even when that enemy wears your wedding ring. I noticed something curious. Every Thursday, Daniel left early, briefcase in hand, suit pressed, but always headed in the same direction, downtown. I followed once. He wasn't going to work. He was going to a law firm. The sign read, Mitchell & Cross, Family Legal Solutions. My curiosity turned to nausea, because I realized Daniel wasn't just a stranger. He was her lawyer, the same one who handled our divorce papers.
I went home and searched the firm's records online. My heart stopped. Every document filed during my coma had been signed and witnessed by that same firm. He hadn't just married my wife, he'd represented her while she ended our marriage. I closed my laptop slowly, as if the truth would explode if I moved too fast. I wanted to scream, but all I did was whisper, "She didn't just betray me. She built a life on my silence." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching rain blur the city lights, thinking about every word she'd ever said to me. Every forever, every trust me, every I love you. And I realized something terrifying. None of it was real. It was convenience dressed as love, because love doesn't vanish when things get hard. It fights, it stays, it waits. And if it leaves, it wasn't love to begin with. So I made a decision. If she could rewrite my story while I was sleeping, then I'd rewrite hers while she was wide awake. But I wasn't going to hurt her. That would be too easy and too merciful. No, I'd make her see. I'd make her remember. And when the truth came out, it wouldn't just break her new life. It would make her question whether she'd ever truly lived one. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't kill you instantly. It keeps you alive long enough to teach you patience. And patience was all I had left. It was a Monday morning when the phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer because, lately, every call felt like another reminder of how alone I was. But something in me said, pick up. Hello? A pause. Then a man's voice, steady, warm, confident. Mr. Dawson, my name is Daniel Cross. For a second, my heart stopped. Daniel. Her husband. The voice continued before I could speak. I was married to Anna, your ex-wife. The way he said was sent a shiver through me. She passed away 2 weeks ago. The world went silent. The ceiling fans stopped sounding like air and started sounding like echoes. I sat down without meaning to. Passed away. He kept talking, his voice now soft, measured, like he was walking on glass. He had a stroke at home. It was sudden. Ethan's been staying with me since. He doesn't know everything yet, but he asks about you. He paused. He calls you Dad. I didn't breathe. After everything, after the betrayal, after the lies, my son still remembered me that way? Mr. Dawson, Daniel continued, before she died, Anna left something for you. A letter. She made me promise to deliver it if anything ever happened to her. A letter? I'd like to meet and hand it to you myself. There's also something else you should know, something she asked me not to tell anyone until you heard it from me. My hands were cold. My voice barely worked. Where and when? Tomorrow morning, Hutch's Diner, 9 a.m. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't cry either, because grief for someone who betrayed you feels different. It's not tears, it's questions that don't stop breathing. What did she write? Why him? And what could he possibly have to tell me that could still hurt after everything? But deep down, I knew it wasn't hurt I feared. It was understanding. He was already there when I walked in. Neat suit, same man I'd seen through that window weeks ago. Only this time, he looked different. Tired. He stood up, extended my hand. Mr. Dawson, I appreciate you coming. I didn't take it. I just sat down. He slid an envelope across the table. My name on it. Her handwriting. I didn't open it yet. Instead, I looked at him. He looked back, and for the first time I saw something in his eyes I hadn't expected. Fear. There's something I found after she died. Medical records, paternity tests, documents she kept hidden. I didn't understand them until I saw your name. The air between us turned electric. Ethan isn't my son, Mr. Dawson. He's yours. I didn't speak. Didn't blink. He kept going. She told me she'd done a test after the accident. She was scared, terrified you'd find out and take him away. She said you were in a coma and she had to protect Ethan's future. So she rewrote the papers, changed the father's name, made me the guardian. My hand shook. All those years of thinking I'd lost my son, he'd been mine all along. She wanted to tell you, he added, but then she got sick. She told me before the stroke, if I don't make it, he deserves the truth. I opened the letter. Her handwriting was familiar, flowing, painful to look at. If you're reading this, I didn't get to apologize in person. You deserved honesty. I gave you betrayal instead. Ethan is yours. He always was. I lied because fear felt safer than truth. You were never the problem. I was. Forgive me, if you can. I closed it.
slowly. Forgive? That word didn't belong here. Daniel sat across from me, waiting. I want you to be in Ethan's life, he said. I can't undo what she did, but I can make it right.
I looked at him, and for a moment I saw a man not as my enemy, but as another piece of her broken truth. Then he said the words that would ignite everything I'd been trying to bury. He already calls me Dad, but I'll help him remember you too. That was it, the spark, the moment forgiveness died and clarity was born. He thought he was being kind. He didn't understand that every word he spoke was a reminder of how easily they'd all rewritten my life without me. I stood up, slid the letter back into the envelope. "Thank you for the truth," I said quietly. "And thank you for reminding me why I'm still here." I walked out of that diner with a new truth burning in my chest. Not just that Ethan was mine, but that I had every right to take back what was stolen. And this time, I would do it my way. When I left Hutch's diner that morning, the sky looked different. Too bright, too blue, too clean for the kind of truth I was carrying. The world was going about its day. Cars honking, people laughing, someone walking a dog, as if the universe didn't just collapse quietly inside me. Ethan was mine. Anna had lied. Daniel had been her shield. But something about his story didn't fit. There was a missing piece, a reason why she'd chosen to build an entire lie instead of just walking away. And I wasn't the kind of man who could live without knowing why. That night, I went through the old boxes in my garage, the ones from before the accident. I hadn't touched them since. Inside were bills, photos, bits of our old life I'd tried to forget. Then I found something strange, a thick yellow envelope marked Insurance Personal. Inside were hospital statements and payment receipts, but none of them matched my accident. Different dates, different ID, different hospital. All under Anna Dawson. The earliest was from 4 years ago, long before my coma. It listed a doctor's name I didn't recognize. Dr. Martin Voss, Cambridge Clinic. And next to the note, confidential, private consultation. Private consultation. That's what she'd called her art therapy sessions. I used to drive her there, wait outside. She'd say, "It helps me manage the stress, honey. Don't worry." She wasn't painting. She was hiding. The next morning, I drove to the address. The clinic still existed. A small, discreet building behind a row of townhouses. A brass sign read, Cambridge Fertility and Genetic Services. Genetic. The word hit me before I even went inside. I asked the receptionist if Dr. Voss still worked there. She said no, he'd retired last year, but when I gave my name, her eyes flickered with recognition. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, polite but cautious. "I can't disclose any patient information." I smiled, though my voice trembled. "I'm not asking about a patient, I'm asking about my wife." She hesitated. Then quietly, "You're Mr. Dawson?" I nodded. She took a deep breath. "Please wait here." 5 minutes later, an older nurse came out with a folder, small, worn, confidential, stamped in red. She didn't hand it to me. She just said, "Your wife insisted everything remain sealed, but she said if you ever came, you should see this." She left the folder on the counter and walked away. I opened it right there in the lobby.
Inside were 3 documents: a DNA profile, a fertility report, and a signed letter of consent. The letter read, "Patient requests non-disclosure of prior medical treatments, including donor insemination records, in the event of spousal inquiry." Donor insemination. My mind couldn't process it at first. Ethan? My son? The boy who looked like me? The boy I was told was mine, then told wasn't, then told was again. Which was it? I flipped to the DNA report, and that's when I saw it. My name listed as genetic father, matched through stored samples from a fertility procedure 5 years ago. She'd used me. She'd taken samples, signed off as an anonymous donor, and then lied to both me and Daniel about whose child Ethan really was. That's when I realized she hadn't just betrayed me emotionally, she'd manipulated biology. She'd made Ethan's entire existence a secret built on control.
And Daniel, he'd never known the truth. Even in his honesty, he'd only inherited her lies. The woman I thought I knew was never really there. She was an idea, a story told by someone who changed endings whenever it suited her. I sat in my car with the folder in my lap, reading the same lines over and over until they stopped making sense. The paper shook in my hands. For years, I'd blamed myself for the distance between us, for working too much, for missing dinners, for forgetting anniversaries. But the truth was simpler. She'd already been gone. Long before my accident, long before the coma, she'd been preparing her escape. Maybe she never wanted a husband. Maybe she wanted control. And I was just the tool she used to build it. That night, I called Mark, my oldest friend, the one who'd gone silent after the accident. He picked up on the second ring. "Mark, it's me," I said. Silence. Then a sharp breath. "Jesus, David, you're alive." He sounded shocked, maybe guilty. "Did you know?" I asked quietly. "Know what?" "That she remarried. That she told everyone I wasn't coming back?" He sighed, the sound of someone holding too many truths for too long. "David, she told everyone you were brain dead, said you wouldn't recover, that keeping you on support was cruel." I felt my throat tighten. "She said that?" "Yeah, she showed the papers, the doctor's notes. I tried calling the hospital once, but she said it would only make things harder for her and Ethan. And I believed her." He paused, voice cracking. "I'm sorry, man. I really thought you were gone." Anna hadn't just rewritten my marriage. She'd rewritten my death. Every lie she told was designed to erase me from existence. And it worked for a while. But lies have an expiration date, and hers had just run out. I looked at Ethan's photo on my dashboard, the same smile, the same dimple, the same spark I once saw in the mirror, and I whispered to myself, "You'll know me, son. Even if she tried to erase me, you'll know the truth." That night, under the hum of the streetlights, I began writing my own plan, not for destruction, but revelation. Because the sweetest revenge isn't payback, it's truth, delivered in a way they can't escape. And when the world found out who I really was, Anna's perfect story would crumble like every lie she ever told. The first night I stopped pretending to sleep, I lit one lamp and left everything else in shadow. The house felt bigger in the dark, like a stage waiting for actors who hadn't yet learned their lines. I spread the folder from the clinic across the kitchen table, DNA reports, invoices, that signed consent note, and I started to map the truth like a roadmap. Revenge, I decided then, would not be a scream. It would be a sequence of small, unavoidable facts that, when put together, would do the shouting for me. Step 1 was obvious. Secure the proof. I couldn't rely on memories or on anything Anna might have destroyed. I needed documents, timestamps, independent witnesses, things that lived outside her voice. So I made a list. Clinic records, archived DNA sample log, donor ID and chain of custody. Emails, the ones she sent to Daniel, to the law firm, to friends hinting at the plan. Financials, any transfers to the clinic, payments that didn't match our household accounts. Legal filings, the divorce packet, who signed it, which firm handled it, affidavits. Witnesses, the nurse who'd slipped me the folder, Dr. Voss's retired assistant, the hospital administrator who'd shared Daniel's number. When you're trying to unmask someone who built a life on editing the truth, the best weapon is to force the truth to exist in places she can't control. Paper, servers, third-party testimony. I started small. I called the clinic back, the one the receptionist had whispered about. Officially, calmly. I said I was following up on records related to a family matter. I didn't say paternity or fraud or any of the words that sting the moment you speak them. I asked for chain of custody logs, for protocol descriptions, for who accessed what files and when. The woman on the line gave protocol answers. Dry, bureaucratic, perfect. They resisted giving me copies. That's when I learned to be patient. I asked quietly for the name of the records manager. I asked where she lived, what hours she kept. I learned she had a sister who volunteered at the same church my mother once attended. Small details are doors. I knocked on enough doors until someone had to leave the house to answer. On the third call, a nurse named Marta, one that had been kind to Anna in the past, the one who'd left the folder on the counter, agreed to meet me. She insisted it be public and brief. We sat in the diner near the clinic. She was older than I expected, hands that had held more grief than gossip. She told me what the folder couldn't. Anna had been afraid of DNA linking her to decisions she'd made. She'd paid for sealed records. She'd insisted files be coded. And then she'd slipped. She'd referenced Daniel in a panic email the month before my accident, asking him to handle things. Why? I asked. Marta looked at me like a woman deciding whether a truth would hurt more than holding it in. She said she was protecting Ethan, Marta whispered. From hurt. From scandal. But your name was on the paperwork, she said, not hers. He was recorded as anonymous donor and then later as anonymous father. It was messy. She signed things differently at different times. Messy, careful, calculated. That's the language of someone who planned to erase a man without ever touching him.
Next, I dug in the quiet way men who are used to being underestimated dig. I opened a new email account under my full name and started sending formal, polite requests. Copies of filings, notarized affidavits, chain of custody logs to lawyers, clinics, and administrative offices. Every no I received helped me find the next yes. Every delay became a timestamp I could log. I hired a private investigator, not the trench coat and fedora type, but a discreet, licensed man who understood how to draw data without making noise. He pulled movement records, which phones were in which locations at what times, who visited the clinic, who deposited checks to which accounts. He found a shadow transaction sequence, payments from a shell account registered to a trust connected to Anna's art gallery. The money trail always led away from my name and right into the places she wanted invisible. I made copies, certified copies, Digital copies with checksums and timestamps. I stored them in 3 places: a lawyer's safe, my friend Mark's attic lockbox, and an encrypted cloud where no one else held the password. You learn quickly, the best revenge keeps you legally unassailable. Evidence must be clean, admissible, undeniable. Step 2 was to test the law. I needed someone on the inside who cared more about right than about money or reputation. I met a lawyer, I'll call her Ava, through an old client of mine who owed nothing but loyalty after years of trusting me with small jobs. Ava had a simple face and a complicated brain. When she read the DNA report and the envelope from Anna, she didn't flinch. She asked one question: "Do you want restoration or exposure?" I said both. Ava mapped the legal path: file an emergency petition to establish paternity officially, request custody review based on fraud and misrepresentation, subpoena the clinic's records, and file a civil suit for wrongful removal of a child from his father's custody. The law moves slow, she warned, but it moves in a straight line when you give it evidence. We filed, quietly, formally. Papers were served, to Daniel, to the law firm, to the clinic. Each delivery was another stone on a path that would eventually crush a glass house. But courtrooms are dry places. They move facts. They don't always move people. I needed the community to understand what had happened, to reframe the narrative from the heroic man who rescued Anna to the man who lied while another man slept. The Whitford name held sway in our town. Graham's donations bought good opinions. I couldn't fight a fortune with outrage. I had to fight it with consequence. So I started where they couldn't buy silence: the truth, told slowly and publicly. I volunteered at Ethan's school. I signed up for the PTA. I fixed playground lights and mended broken benches with my own hands. I didn't make speeches. I showed up. The neighbors noticed the man who fixed things. The woman from the clinic who'd slipped me the folder started to volunteer more openly now that I was visible. Witnesses lined up: nurses, teachers, one ex-coworker who'd seen Anna cashing checks under odd names. When people saw you working for the same community they loved, they stopped listening to the polished voice of a man in a suit and started asking questions. Reputation is fragile. It leaks. With every good deed I did, I wasn't just rebuilding my life, I was letting the contrast between what I did and what Anna's new life represented appear in public view. There was another piece: Daniel. He wasn't a villain by nature. He was an instrument. His role had to be exposed not with violence, but with ethics. Representing a client in divorce while entering into marriage with her and signing documents that affected someone else's parental rights hinted at a conflict of interest that could ruin his legal standing. Ava advised filing a complaint to the state bar, not because I wanted to punish him out of cruelty, but because the law should be blind and honest. If Daniel had overstepped, the bar would investigate. Ethics committees love facts. I gave them facts. Meanwhile, I used the media, not to scream, but to seed. A local columnist I respected had written about the Whitford family before. I reached out with nothing but proof and a request: come see the records. He did. He didn't run a headline that week. He wrote a column 3 months later, after documents and depositions started to paint a pattern. In it, he asked questions the town had never thought to ask. It didn't accuse. It invited curiosity. Curiosity is dangerous in public life. It makes people look. Every step was deliberate. No theatrics, no threats, just the steady accumulation of facts and community goodwill. The plan was not to ruin lives out of spite. It was to rebuild mine on a foundation that stood where hers had been hollow. It was to set off a chain reaction where lies could not survive scrutiny. Late one night, as I sealed another envelope to the court, Mark called. "You're different," he said. "Not angry. Cold. That's scarier." I answered, "I'm focused. Anger burns out. Focus doesn't." I placed the sealed case file into Ava's hand in her office the next morning. She looked at me with a steadiness I'd come to trust. She said, "We start motion hearings next week. We'll subpoena the clinic. We'll request he testify. We'll ask for temporary custody while this gets sorted." My heart skipped, not from hope, but from the weight of the plan finally moving. My son was somewhere in the world calling this man Dad. My work would not be easy, and the fight was not pretty. But it would be clean.
And there was one more thing, something small and personal. Before I filed anything public, I printed a photo of Ethan, one I'd taken the summer we'd built the treehouse, and taped it to my toolbox. Every morning, when I left for work, I saw that face. That picture was a reminder, not of what I'd lost, but of what I was building back. The plan was in motion. The quiet machinery of truth had started to hum. They had spent months rewriting history around me. Now history would be rewritten around them. The courthouse smelled of paper and polish, the kind of sterile air where truth and performance look almost the same. I sat in the second row beside Ava, my lawyer, the folder of evidence between us, each page a blade I'd sharpened for this moment. Across the aisle sat Daniel. Neat suit, polished shoes, that same careful calm he always wore. But his eyes gave him away. The faint tremor of a man who had spent months convincing himself he'd done nothing wrong. And in the front row, the social worker guiding Ethan in. He was taller now, serious in his small blazer, fingers clutching a toy car he refused to put down. He didn't look at me yet. I didn't blame him. The judge entered. Everyone rose. The sound of chairs scraping the floor was the only sound that felt human. Ava started quietly. "Your Honor, this isn't a case of vengeance. It's a case of identity. A father erased while alive." She laid out the timeline. Accident, coma, false declaration of brain death, forged guardianship, concealed medical records. Each fact landed with the slow weight of inevitability. You could almost hear the air leave the room. When she finished, the judge turned to Daniel. "Mr. Cross, did you represent Mrs. Dawson in her divorce from the petitioner while engaging in a personal relationship with her?" Daniel's throat tightened. Yes, Your Honor, but—" The judge raised a hand. "No buts. Continue." Ava rose again. "We have signed affidavits showing financial transfers between Mr. Cross's firm and Cambridge Fertility Clinic, LLC, the same clinic that handled the respondent's private consultation. We also have genetic documentation confirming the petitioner's biological paternity of the child." The judge's eyebrows lifted. "Introduce Exhibit E." I'd already numbered them in my head, E for Ethan. Ava opened the folder like a stage magician revealing the obvious. She said, "This is the verified DNA profile. Chain of custody confirmed by the clinic and a third-party lab." Daniel's lawyer objected. Chain of custody, confidentiality, technical procedure. The judge waved it off. "We're not trying a science experiment. We're establishing a fact." When the clerk read the results aloud, probability of paternity 99.98%, the room fell into the kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat. Daniel sank a little lower in his chair. The color drained from his face. He looked less like a villain and more like a man watching the scaffolding of his life collapse plank by plank. Then Ava slid the next sheet across. A notarized note from Anna, the one she'd written before her death. The judge read it silently, then spoke. "He was always his father. I was afraid of losing control." "Those are her words?" Ava nodded. He exhaled. "Fear is no defense for falsifying documents, Miss Cross." Even the court reporter looked up for a moment, maybe forgetting to type. It was my turn. The judge asked if I wanted to speak. I stood slowly. The room blurred for a second, then sharpened. "I'm not here to ruin anyone," I said. "I'm here because for 3 years I was dead on paper while breathing. Because my son grew up believing another man was his father.
because the woman who said she loved me was afraid of truth more than she was of lies. I turned toward Daniel. You weren't the enemy, Daniel. You were the replacement. But even replacements deserve to know what they're replacing. He looked away. I faced the judge again. I just want my name back where it belongs, next to my son's. The judge leaned forward, voice quieter now. And what of revenge, Mr. Dawson? I smiled, thin and tired. Revenge is just truth with better timing. When the decision came, it didn't sound triumphant. It sounded inevitable. The court recognizes David Dawson as the biological and legal father of Ethan Dawson. All previous guardianship orders are hereby void. The State Bar is instructed to open an ethics inquiry into Mr. Cross's conduct. A gavel struck once. The echo traveled through marble, wood, bone. Daniel's lawyer packed his papers in silence. Daniel tried to speak. David, I didn't know. But I was already walking past him. Ethan was standing near the bench, watching. When our eyes finally met, he hesitated, then said softly, "Are you really my dad?" My throat tightened. I knelt so we were eye to eye. "I always was, buddy." He nodded once, serious in that way kids get when they sense the adults are barely holding together. "Mom said you fix things."
I swallowed hard. I guess I still do. Outside, cameras waited. I hadn't invited them, but truth attracts light. Ava spoke for the record, calm and factual. The reporter who'd written that first column asked, "Mr. Dawson, do you consider this justice?" I looked up at the courthouse behind me. "Justice isn't winning," I said. "It's making sure the lies don't get the last word." Then I took Ethan's hand and walked through the crowd as flashes popped like tiny lightning strikes. That night, when the city finally went quiet, I stood on my porch alone. No champagne, no cheers, just relief. Some people think revenge is about fire. It isn't. It's about clarity. It's the moment you see every lie in daylight and know it can never go back to shadow. I'd spent months collecting truth like evidence. Now, it was done. The silence that followed wasn't emptiness. It was peace. When the headlines faded and the noise of the courthouse died, what was left wasn't victory. It was stillness. The kind of silence that comes after a long storm. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even call anyone. I just drove home with the window down, letting the wind fill a space that words never could. The next morning, the world looked ordinary again. The same cracked driveway, the same worn-out porch step, but everything felt different. I made breakfast for Ethan. Pancakes, just like we used to. He didn't say much, just watched me flip the batter with quiet curiosity. After a while, he asked softly, "Did you really fix everything, Dad?" I smiled. Not everything. Just enough. He nodded like he understood more than a 7-year-old should. Then he handed me his toy car, the same one from the courtroom. "You can keep it, for when I'm not here." I almost broke then, but I didn't. Because this wasn't about me anymore. It was about giving him the truth and a future built on it. Ava called later that week. Daniel had resigned from his firm. The ethics committee accepted his license suspension, 2 years minimum. He'd also sent a short letter. "I don't expect forgiveness. You were right, I was a replacement. But I won't stand in the way of your son knowing the man he deserves to." I read it twice, folded it once, filed it away. The clinic, too, had been fined. Confidential breach violations, falsified patient identity entries, procedural misconduct. It didn't make me happy. It just made things right. The truth had finally become official record. And that's all I ever wanted. You learn something strange when you spend years chasing revenge. It doesn't come with applause. It doesn't roar. It whispers. Justice isn't a sword. It's a scalpel. It only cuts what it must.
People in town began to look at me differently, not with pity, not with curiosity, but with respect. Even those who'd believed Anna's story now avoided saying her name, not out of shame, but because they finally understood that some lies grow too heavy to repeat. I started working again. Carpentry, small repair jobs, the kind that make you feel useful, one nail at a time. Sometimes Ethan joined me after school. He'd hand me screws, line up the boards, and when he smiled, that same crooked grin he had since he was 3, it felt like the world had finally exhaled. One evening, after Ethan fell asleep, I opened the letter Anna had written again. I'd read it 100 times, but this time, I noticed a line I'd missed before. "If I'm gone, don't let hate race our son. Let truth do it." For a long time, I sat there staring at those words. Maybe she wasn't asking for forgiveness. Maybe she was warning me. And for once, I decided to listen. So I didn't hate her anymore. I didn't have to. The truth had already done what hatred never could. It ended the lie. Justice had been served not through shouting, not through rage, but through precision. Every lie had been cut at its root, every shadow dragged into light. And in that light, I found something unexpected. Peace. I didn't win. I didn't lose. I just stopped bleeding. Revenge had given me back what grief had stolen. Clarity. And when you can see clearly, you stop swinging in the dark. That night, I stood outside with Ethan on the porch. He looked up at the stars, the same ones that used to glow on his bedroom ceiling. "Mom used to say stars are wishes," he said. "What do you wish for?" I asked. He thought for a moment. "That we don't forget her, but we don't forget you either." I smiled. "Then we won't." He leaned his head on my arm. The world was quiet again. My wife left me while I was in a coma. Her new husband called me Dad. But in the end, I didn't need to destroy anyone. The truth did it for me. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't rage, it's restoration. Not showing them what they lost, but becoming someone they can never touch again. And that is justice.
Thanks for watching. Do subscribe for get more kind of stories as well.